Hello and welcome to your Bullyproof Life, where we shine a spotlight on toxic workplace cultures. I'm Marylise de Villiers. I'm a performance coach and the author of Roar, How to Tame the Bully Inside and Out. The role of the show is twofold. On the one hand, we look at the importance of human-centered leadership in creating high-performing individuals, teams and cultures. And on the other hand, we look at the individuals, the targets of workplace bullying, and how they can deal with these situations better. How they can turn their thoughts, feelings, words and actions into their 4 superpowers. And yes, it will get uncomfortable at times. This is where we talk about the things that get in the way. So we're not jumping straight away to the how-to, which is a seductive shortcut. We'll talk about things like fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, resistance to vulnerability. Yeah, all those tough subjects. My role as a host and an author is to highlight the staggering financial and emotional costs directly attributable to toxic workplace cultures and to challenge leaders to create safer, more inclusive, more dignified workplaces where everybody can thrive and in turn make their organizations more resilient. So I'm going to jump over to Zoom now to introduce our guest for today. See you soon. In today's episode, we're going to look at the importance of finding your unique purpose. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Karsten Alva-Jorgensen. So let me tell you a little bit about Carsten. Hi, Carsten.
Hello. Nice to be with you today.
Yeah, wonderful to have you. So Carsten is a sought-after speaker, trainer and coach on human behavior, leadership, high performance and empowered living. As the founder of Inner Power Advantage Limited, his mission is to empower people to live their inspired life through connecting to their purpose and inner power. He loves teaching powerful principles, tools and methods for living an empowered life and also loves spending time with his 2 adopted children. In parallel with 3 decades as an executive in financial services, Karsten has trained extensively with leading luminaries in the field of leadership and human behavior, including Dr. John DeMartini, Brendan Burchard and John Maxwell. So Karsten, I'm curious to know a little bit more about you, your personal story, and why you are so passionate about finding our unique purpose.
All right. Well, it's lovely to be with you today, Marylise, and with everybody who is listening in. So I grew up in Copenhagen, Denmark, and was adopted from birth. Had 2 wonderful Danish parents and Danish family. And since then, my life has been quite international. Even as a young child, I lived in Madrid, in Spain, with my parents. When I was 19, I moved to the US to pursue my university degree there. I've lived and worked in Asia. So quite an international career, all in financial services. But all along, if I was true to my heart, I really was passionate about people. Fortunately, even in financial services, it's all about people. And I think business is ultimately about people. And I think today we'll get into one of the aspects that I really think matters most, and that is purpose and meaning. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
So I'm going to dive straight in and ask you, what is your definition of unique purpose, and just talk to us a little bit about purpose and what that means to you.
Okay, well, so I'll start by talking about purpose, and then maybe we'll get into the unique aspect of it, since I do believe we all have we're certainly all unique in so many ways, and we have unique things to offer to the world. So let's think about when we go on a trip. There are different elements to purpose, and I want to try to break those down for us a little bit. So let's imagine we're going on a trip, and somebody might ask us, well, what's the purpose of the trip? Now, there's really two levels to that. At one level, we could say the purpose of the trip, we can answer that from what's the intent of the trip? What's the objective? Why are we going on this trip? What are the results that we're hoping to achieve? And certainly intention and the objective are very important, and we'll come back to those. But there's also a deeper level to purpose, and that is really touching on the why. So why, it's the why behind the intent that really has power. And so we might think about, well, I'm going on this trip with the intent of, having a fabulous time, having new experiences and all of that. But then we might ask ourselves, well, why is that important to me? And when we connect with the why, we get into the meaning and the significance. So purpose really does encompass both things, both the intention, the objective we're trying to meet by a certain activity of our life, but even more importantly, the meaning that's behind that intent.
I love that. And I think that then taps into unique purpose, because I think, you've said this to me before, is our purpose is born out of our unique experiences. So can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I think no doubt as we go through our lives, we will find that there are things that call us uniquely. There are things that are meaningful to us that may not have the same meaning to anyone else. And that often arises out of the things that we value. And what we value are literally those things that we assign a worth to, a value to. And we all have different things that we value, and it's more than one thing. Obviously, we may have a hierarchy of values, which ultimately is what gives us that sense of meaning and purpose. We all want to fulfill on our values, and when we do so, we experience being fulfilled. I like to first really get us connected to why purpose is so important in general, and then connect it into why it's important within the context of our vocational work and our business or employment. So really, I don't want to be negative here, but I think we can say that all human existence does involve challenge for sure, and a degree of suffering. There is suffering and pain in all of our, in our experience, right? At times. And I think meaning and purpose, one of the things that it does for us, it makes that suffering tolerable. I often go back to Viktor Frankl, who wrote a short, fabulous book called Man's Search for Meaning. And it could be really Man's Search for Meaning and Purpose, because the two things are so tightly related. Meaning is really that which gives us the ability to be resilient, to overcome loss and trauma, to sustain ourselves through the challenges of life. In the concentration camps of Auschwitz, what Viktor Frankl saw was it was the people who were able to find meaning in their suffering, meaning in their experience, who survived, literally. And he gives several examples of where someone lost their sense of purpose and meaning. They very quickly succumbed to the challenges of the circumstances. It's a powerful little read. And we also see that meaning in other ways. We probably all have experience of someone who's gone through a traumatic experience. Maybe they've lost their health, at least perhaps for a temporary period of time. And have had to then examine their life to see, well, what meaning can we extract from this experience? How can we make it meaningful? How can we go forward? It can be the loss of a loved one. Those of us who live in the UK will remember Stephen Lawrence as an example, who was a young teenager who sadly was murdered and left to bleed to death on a doorstep. Now, his mother had clearly a huge challenge to overcome with the trauma of that loss in such tragic, unnecessary circumstances. But she found meaning in that, and she made her life about addressing social injustice, the challenges of the institutional racism in the UK police, and so on and so forth. She presented to the House of Lords. Her whole life, it defined a purpose for her. She took that very traumatic experience and turned that into a force for good.
Yeah.
And I think often our purpose can arise out of a challenge or out of a perception of something that's missing. It might be we perceive inequality, we might perceive poverty, we might perceive that our earth is not being well taken care of, the resources of the earth. We might perceive a certain health challenge or a psychological challenge. And in response to that, we find our purpose and meaning in fulfilling on that.
And that's so true, isn't it? Because I have a very similar experience where I've had to dig deep after I've got to a point of burnout in my corporate career because of a toxic work environment, and it really allowed me to write my book and to put a spotlight on workplace bullying, because it hurt me so much. It was such a big challenge for me that I had to overcome, and I found deep purpose and meaning in that myself.
Yes. So often, and we'll come on to this question later, but often people will ask, well, how do I know what my purpose is? And one of the places we can look for that is where our biggest challenges have been in our life, and really mine those for what was meaningful about those challenges. How did they help us grow? What did we learn? And as a result, what do we want to bring more of out into the world? How can we take that experience and turn it into a good for ourselves and for others? Now, about the workplace, if meaning and purpose is one of our innate human needs. And what I would love to do, if you don't mind, is just to quickly do a review of what those human needs are, since it's so often easy for us to not be conscious of our needs, both personally and in the workplace and with the teams that we might lead. Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so first of all, we all have a need for safety. And by that, I mean psychological safety and physical safety. So if our employees are showing up in the workplace and they're worried about catching coronavirus, or they're worried about being bullied or not being respected, not valued, then if they don't feel safe to express themselves, then they're not going to have much capacity for thinking about the meaning and purpose of their work. So the first one is safety. I'll go through this a bit quickly given our time. We also have a need for autonomy. We need to have a sense of control and a feeling of agency in our lives. So it's important that authority is delegated to us and we're given the opportunity to exercise that authority in the ways that we see fit. We have a need for attention, and here I mean both the giving of attention and the receiving of attention. So we need to be noticed, right? That's why it's so important when we show up in the workplace that we acknowledge others, we say good morning, and we allow others to, express acknowledgement and attention to us as well. We have a need for connection, and we're not just transactional beings, right? We need to feel connected to the other people in the workplace. to our leaders in the workplace, to our superiors, and to each other. And along with that, we have a need for community. We need to feel that we are part of something with other people. So we're organized into teams and departments and functions and businesses. But that sense of connection with others in the workplace is tremendously important. We have a need for status. We need to feel that, it's clear what why we're there, not the why, but our own role and the status associated with that role. And I don't mean an ego status, but we need to know kind of who we are in the workplace and be allowed for that to be expressed.
Absolutely. I think it's also I think it's significance. It's that sort of, the status, significance. So you want to feel worthy and.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have a need for privacy. And sometimes that's ignored in a workplace, but I think it's important that we are allowed to maintain our own boundaries on what we share and what we don't share. We should feel free to share, but we should also have our privacy expected, and also have maybe some spaces within the workplace where we can make phone calls, where we can, feel private. We have a need for feeling a sense of competency and achievement. So literally that arises, I think, out of being stretched. So as leaders, we must set challenging goals, and we must allow people to develop new skills and to achieve things and to be acknowledged and celebrated for their achievements. And then finally, we need purpose. We need to have a sense of purpose and meaning. And that is really the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? What's the why of the company? What's the why of the team? How does the team contribute to that bigger why? And what's the why of the individual within the team? So the more we can connect to our individual why and our organizational why, the more we're going to feel engaged with that, with our work and the organization that we work in.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just really always, from my personal experience, and I think you have a shared experience where, you have moved away from a corporate environment because you've realized that your purpose has taken you in a different direction. And so I'm just curious to know your perspective on how often you think people settle because they're in a really good corporate job, but it's not necessarily their passion and their purpose. It doesn't light their fire. It doesn't get them out of bed really in the mornings in that sort of passionate way. So how do you think how are we doing? How are people doing generally in that space?
Well, I think, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge a couple of things about purpose. One of them is our purpose in life changes as we go through life, and it's quite natural. And it's also quite natural that we resist change, right? But if we think about it, in our first 10 years of life, really our purpose is to play, to explore things, the world and people around us, and maybe to build some basic skills. And then in the next 10 years, for those of you who might have teenagers in your life or once been a teenager, you will know that it's all about social interaction with peers. In our 20s to 30s, it's about establishing ourselves, building maybe a relationship with a significant other, starting a career and our financial security. In our 30s and 40s, it's about maybe more about family, having children, expressing ourselves again more sociably and developing vocation. What I found is somewhere around 40s, we start to be much more, we're still focused on building security and supporting, if we have children, obviously supporting them on their independence journey and educational journeys. But there is a sense that we've now established and met some of the basic needs, the safety, security, the basic parts of what we, Maslow's hierarchy kind of articulated. And as those needs are fulfilled, those higher needs like meaning, significant purpose starts to grow within us. And I think that's often the point where people struggle, because what was their purpose initially when they joined an organization was to gain that status, gain competency and skills that they didn't have, gain more financial security. Those things have now been largely met for many people. And now the journey becomes about, later things like meaning, significance, purpose, broadening life. Now, we can, of course, find that in different spheres of our life. So some people do quite well by continuing on in their present occupation and still growing their skills and maybe their position in that. And then they find through hobbies and family and friends other means of sourcing their other needs around purpose and significance. Could be through volunteering, for example, or social causes. However, some people, get to a point where they feel disconnected with the work. Now, that's where we have really two paths we can go, both as leaders in organizations as individuals. So let's think about the individual. Yes, many people then actually find it's kind of they don't find a path within their organization to progress and to regain that sense of purpose and meaning. And so they might find it's easier to leave the organization and to create that in either a new organization or in their own business or their own entrepreneurial career. On the other hand, I think as leaders, there's a whole lot we can do within the organizations to help people through that phase in their life and retain what often are most skilled and competent employees. Now, I would challenge any leader or any supervisor or any manager to actually know what is it that excites your employees? What do they value? What are they excited about? What gives them meaning in their life? If we don't ask these questions, and if we don't create a space where we can have that conversation, either one-to-one in private or in team settings, we're really missing a trick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think this is where I get really this is really close to my heart, because I do think human-centered leadership is going to be a bit of a theme this year. We're sort of in a pandemic, and we've seen the repercussions, especially on the mental health of our workers in very, very highly strung environments, suddenly having to cope with so many competing demands, homeschooling to mention one.
Yes.
And it's that sort of making that space, as you say, and having those personal conversations and asking those personal type questions and focusing on the human, I think is going to be so absolutely critical.
And our values do also change when there is a cataclysmic type of event, right, in our life. And it can be a challenge. Certainly for many people, coronavirus has been a big challenge, led to a lot of reflection about what's really important, led to a lot more time and being present with our loved ones, hopefully. And I think in business, we're going to find that as the employees come back into a new normal, whatever that ends up being, we really need to take out some time to think about what is the experience our employees have had. What's changed for them in their lives? What's changed in their perception about who they are, what's important, and their relationship with the workplace and the employer? And if we don't have that conversation, as I said, I believe we will run the risk of losing some of the very best people in our organizations. Now, equally, there's an upside here. If we can, the more we connect what's important, what employees value, find meaning and significance in, the more we can understand what that is, the better we can redesign some of the job descriptions And often it doesn't take that much to re-engage an employee or ourselves into our work. It is really a matter of having the conversation, doing the reflection, looking at what the insights are, and as an employer and a leader, allowing the space for that conversation to take place, actively listening and being interested and curious about what that experience has been for our employees, and then taking some small action to allow for a greater sense of meaning and purpose to be manifested for that employee within their job responsibilities.
I hope all the leaders out there that are watching today has carefully listened to what Carsten has just said. So, do listen to it again, because it's profound. It's so important. I think it's incredibly.
And the reason I wanted to go through all of the needs is because I think we can't just do this around purpose. We have to, address the safety, the security, all the other elements that I went through as well. Absolutely. And so we do have a job at our hands, but if we're truly in leadership, I think this is going to be the most important task of 2021 as your employees return into the physical workspace. And I would suggest it's a conversation to begin now. There's no better time than the beginning of the year, when all of us have a natural tendency to kind of reflect on who we are, where we are going, and what matters to us. This is really the time to have that conversation so that we keep that engagement with our employees.
Absolutely. So, Carsten, I'm going to jump back to the individual for a moment, and particularly mention someone who is experiencing adversity in the workplace. So, I mean, lots of different types of adversity, but specifically perhaps a toxic work environment, or dealing with a person who is what I sometimes term as a brilliant jerk. Yes. And might be really struggling to cope with the environment and the individual, but also, probably the last thing on their mind is purpose, and they're just kind of going through the motions. What advice do you have for them?
Well, we got to address whatever needs is not being met. So if we take somebody who's struggling, if they are feeling, maybe overwhelmed, maybe bullied, maybe not respected, not valued within the organization, then we got to address those things first. Purpose is a little bit at the top of that hierarchy of needs, right? And if we don't feel safe and secure in our employment, if there is constant rounds of redundancies or just constant uncertainty, and especially if that's not being acknowledged, so our experience is not being acknowledged, understood, talked about, then purpose is not going to be the number one thing in our mind. It's going to be, what's the security of my employment? Can I feel secure that my next paycheck is going to come? If we're not being respected, if we're not being valued, if we're not receiving attention from our organization, from our leaders, then we're not going to be sufficiently trusting of that organization and willing to give of ourselves. We are emotional beings. And the powerful thing about purpose and meaning is it evokes our emotions, it evokes our imagination, it stirs us, right? It inspires us. And but for that to take place, we have to have those other things taken care of as well.
Absolutely. And so if someone is in a tough spot in terms of really struggling, and their mental health and their physical health is struggling, what would your advice be?
Well, I think it can be hard to generalize. The first thing I would do, if and I do this for myself, and I do, as Mary-Lise knows, sometimes go through tough spots myself, right? I can have a tendency towards feeling low. And what I would suggest is really go through the list of needs and assess yourself out of a scale from 0 to 10. How safe do you feel physically or emotionally? How much do you feel you have autonomy and agency as a degree of control in what happens to you in your life? How much attention do you give and receive? How much connection do you feel? Human connection to others. How much sense of community do you have? How much sense of status, like position and status? We are hierarchical beings, and if we have a need to know where are we in the pack, right? Where do we fit in? How much clarity of that do we have? Do we have a sense of privacy, or have we lost that because we've been isolated at home for months and months on end, and we just, don't feel that we have any sense, ability to be quiet and reflect and to have privacy around us? What is our sense of competency and achievement? And then what is our degree of purpose and meaning being expressed through our life? Now, go through and assess yourself from 0 to 10 on each of those things. And you'll see, there will be a range of scores. And then really the goal becomes to think about, well, where am I scoring the lowest? Pick maybe the 3 areas that have the lowest scores. And then think quite practically, what could I do today that improves that score just a little bit? What can I do this week that actually shifts me in a positive direction? And I promise you, if you, and track it maybe, some of us like to have spreadsheets with scores and actions, whatever works for you, do that. But take some positive action to improve in these categories, and you will start to feel better.
Absolutely. And I think it's really, really key that, it opens your mind if you look at that broad range of human needs and score yourself in each of those areas. You might not even be thinking today about 2 or 3 or 5 of those areas, but just by becoming aware and becoming conscious, you can shift your attention and your focus to work on something else that is meaningful to you, and that attention shift is already going to be so positive in your life.
Absolutely. And alongside with that, this is a heartfelt plea for you to, if you're in that situation, first of all, be clear on where you are. Secondly, get clear on what you need. Share what you need with others, right? So often, as I've been a leader in multiple organizations, quite often I might not have had the wherewithal to understand what my people needed. But I promise you, 9 out of 10 leaders, if you go to your boss with a request, it could be one single simple request that would improve your experience. Your leader, your boss is going to want to try to fulfill that request. We all love to help. Yes. And leaders in businesses, yes, we are concerned about results and outcomes and a myriad of things, but we're also human beings, and we want our people to feel well in general. I know there is a few exceptions, but they're really few. Right? Most of us are going to want to do what we can to address whatever concern our employees may have. So ask for some time, be clear about what you need. The challenge is, if you don't know what you need, it's very hard for somebody else to know it. And if you don't make the request, it takes the agency out of your hands, and it becomes only by chance that somebody else discovers it. And with all of us being remote and all of that, that's probably not going to happen. So be clear on where you are, what you need, share what you need with people you trust, and make requests. And you can set yourself onto an improved path.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I'm reflecting as you're saying it, how difficult it is for us to ask for help.
So difficult, especially when we feel vulnerable, right? Since we don't want to show up vulnerable, like we have some sort of innate resistance to that, right? Especially in the workplace, we want to put our suit and tie or professional attire, and we want to kind of pretend that that we're invincible, We want to be that sort of hero that just keeps overcoming obstacles and have no needs. And I was like that early in my career. And I tell you, it did not work very well, right? Yes, I got promoted and all of that, but so much more opened up, so much more became possible when I became more willing to share who I was as a person, what was important to me, what challenges I was dealing with. And this was even across organizational boundaries. For many years, I worked as a management consultant at senior levels. And I thought, there's no way I can share with my customers, with my clients, what I need, right? But absolutely, that was wrong. That was a false belief and a limiting belief. Once I realized that I could share about what some of my needs were and why I couldn't attend to something in that moment, but how I would handle it, people respected me more, not less.
100%. And I think I want to also pick up on the human need of connection. In the sense that I always say it's first and foremost your connection with yourself. So what you've just described is you going on that personal journey and really getting to know who you are and connecting with you and your purpose, and then you can actually give to others and connect with others and create meaningful relationships. But it starts with that connection with yourself.
I want to kind of take a moment and maybe have you think about, there'll be times for all of us where we've been on purpose, right? And there'll be times when we've been off purpose. And I think we all know just how different those two experiences are. When we are on purpose, one of the things that happen is we awaken our executive center. And that means we're more consistent, more reliable, more organized, more certain and confident of ourselves.
More creative.
More creative was the next thing I was going to say. Absolutely, right? And more inspired. So we know that for ourselves, right? When we are engaged in the activity that really gives us a lot of meaning, all of those things start to show up. Nobody has to remind us. Nobody has to cajole us to do those things, right? And therefore, that's true in the workplace as well. So if, as leaders, we can help people to connect into their purpose, they will be inspired to do the work. Now, there's a massive difference, but we really only have two ways we can influence people. We either inspire them, we touch, move, and inspire them by connecting to the sense of meaning, by evoking imagination and emotion and a vision and a possibility, or we have to manipulate people. And I don't mean manipulation is always like this evil negative thing, but by manipulation, I mean we have to use extrinsic rewards and motivators, right? And they just don't go as far. All the studies show, yep, you can give somebody a salary increase and they'll feel good about it for a very short time. And then their behavior is exactly the same, right? So yes, we can manipulate people through, external incentives and, checking in and kind of control-oriented, all those things that we sometimes default to doing. But there's a world of difference between manipulation, which is always short-lived in its effect, and inspiration, which really can be long-lasting. And when we can inspire our people and they feel inspired to do the work because they understand and are connected to the why of the work and the meaning of the work and the meaning of their contribution, we don't need all of those extrinsic motivators anymore. We don't need to micromanage. We don't need to supervise to that level. People will show up as their best selves. And this is really where our focus should be as leaders.
Absolutely love that. So, as you were talking, I've sort of been thinking about books that I've read. So, you've mentioned Man's Search for Meaning by
Yes.
Viktor Frankl, which I agree is a wonderful book. You talked about Give and Take. There's also a fantastic book by Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist who wrote a book about give and take, and how there's some very, very interesting research and how givers are ultimately, the ones that succeed, excel in life. Surprise, surprise. And then, oh gosh, just slipped my mind. Towards the end, you've mentioned, oh, the why. Start with why. Simon
Yes.
Sinek's, start with why.
I think one, and I mentioned the importance of values. There's a book called The Values Factor by
Right.
John DeMartini. I can highly recommend that. And it's maybe not one of the books you would come across in your business reading, unlike the Start With Why book. So that's one of them. And from John Maxwell, there's a book called Intentional Living, which also will talk about purpose and meaning and how to fall into that.
Oh, that is so incredible. Thank you, Karsten. I mean, such a wealth of practical tips. I feel like this has been an absolute masterclass, and I'm so excited to share this with our viewers. Thank you so much for joining me today. I learned so much from you as always. Every time I speak to you, I learn something new. Just where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn, but certainly people are also welcome to email me at Karsten Alva at innerpower.me. So Karsten Alva at innerpower.me. I am about to take a 2-month retreat out, so I will be back on the email in March, but by all means, if you reach out to me, I run workshops for businesses and business leaders and their employees and departments to help them identify their why, to help them identify their purpose and mission. And I work individually and collectively with leaders to help them with employee engagement and to grow their leadership and impact. And nothing brings me more pleasure, has me be more in my purpose than to be able to serve in that way. And I love the opportunity to continue doing that. And Mary-Lise, I just want to thank you for creating this platform, for your stand of employee well-being and health in the workplace and mental well-being. It's so incredible what you're doing. And I love to see you living in your purpose.
Thank you, Carsten. And I just want to also say to you, best of luck with your, is it 30-day without
30 days of water fasting, yes.
water fasting? I don't think I can do it. Today I'm doing a 24-hour fast, and I can break it at 5 o'clock, and I cannot wait. Anyway,
Yes, please,
yeah,
please.
yeah. So all the best. I just think it's an amazing thing that you're doing, and you're going to have all the benefits and the health benefits from that. I'm really excited to see when you come back as well.
Thank you. Okay, well, this has been awesome. Love to chat to you again, Mary-Lise, and really just a big encouragement to any viewer or listener to this. Take care of your needs. Do the work to reflect on what's meaningful and purposeful for you, and start to take small action to increase that in your life, and you will feel and do better.
Absolutely, baby steps. Thank you so much, Karsten.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.